Let's go from foreign policy to domestic politics. Is the Tea Party dead?
No.
Lamar Alexander wins last night. You know, the Haley Barbour side's like 8-0. You look back at the beginning of this campaign year, and we heard that John Cornyn was going to lose, Lamar Alexander was going to lose. They've struck out in every single race.
They've lost almost all the big races. They had inferior candidates. You know what? The voters are pretty discerning. You get a Marco Rubio type Tea Party candidate, they decide to elect him. You get a McDaniel in Mississippi, they almost elect him. But I would say that my message would be the opposite. Respected Republican incumbents who have never been challenged ever in a primary, been elected 3, 4, or 5 times statewide in their states, are suddenly losing 40% of the vote to challengers. Pat Roberts, Lamar Alexander, 49% of the vote in the case of Thad Cochran. I think that shows that there's a lot of unhappiness with Republican leadership among Republican voters at the grassroots. There's a lot of unhappiness with Washington among voters of both parties at the grassroots. And if Republicans want to do well in 2014, but especially 2016, I think saying, hey, no problem. Grassroots, forget about them. We're the party of Dole, McCain, Bush, Pat Roberts, Lamar Alexander, Thad Cochran. That is not the way to go.
You're saying that's not going to get
that is not going to win. That is not going to win in 2016. So I think a healthy dose of intelligent Tea Party activism remains the way to go.
I'll just say, to the Bill's point, the one thing reinforces is this thing someone sent me while we were talking about it earlier this morning that shows that the anti-Lamar Alexander vote was actually a majority of the vote. He luckily had 6 challengers in that race, and if he had faced maybe 1, he might have been in more trouble. But I do think the question the question I have for Bill, well, I know we want to go someplace else, but is whether the Tea Party is ever a real thing or not to begin with. I mean, it seems to me now, as we move forward, there's always been a populist part of the Republican Party in the grassroots, and the Tea Party phenomenon was kind of, when we look back on it, will have been seen as overblown.
Was it whipped up by the national media, and then you had Tea Party leaders saying, yes, we've done this, when this is just part of, I mean, this happened at the '64 convention. This happened in '66.
But I wouldn't say, if you had said back in 2008 that Marco Rubio is going to beat Charlie Crest and that Ted Cruz is going to beat David Dewhurst, people would have said, really? I don't think that's that's not our father's Republican Party, grandfather's Republican Party. And I think so. Parts of it were whipped up, but the populist sentiment is very strong. The Republican Party should, in September in the House, pass legislation removing the bailout for insurance companies from Obamacare. They're going to go in a populist direction. I think most of them want to get rid of the Export-Import Bank. These are smallish things, medium-sized things, but they're symbolic. It will be interesting to have the Republicans be against the Export-Import Bank, half of whose money goes to Boeing, and the Democrats and Obama defending it. Obama said when he was campaigning in 2008, this is just corporate welfare, which he was right about. Now it's the Democratic Party defending corporate welfare, and the Republicans, I hope, actually going after it.
Christina, I'll ask you the same question. What's the state of the Tea Party right now?
You have to look at how they've really shifted what's happening in Congress. I mean, this last debate before they got out of town is an excellent example. You had some conservative members of the House Republican Conference really shifting an entire debate that had been sort of benefiting the president and the Democrats, and saying to the Senate Democrats, hey, by the way, we're going to take you out too. And so in addition to that, you're seeing this generational shift. All the names you're talking about, in addition to being a representative of a different kind of Republican, they're also older Republicans. And so these Tea Party activists are feeling energized by what they're seeing. You know, like Bill was just saying, it's forcing some of these members to really have to take on some of the messaging from that Tea Party side. And the Republicans are in a good position.
It's an absolute mess, so if you look at both parties, not just the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party. You guys, I'm sure you all saw the CBS poll from earlier this week that most Americans think Congress just absolutely stinks. Only 29% have a favorable impression of the Republicans, 62% unfavorable. Views of the Democrats, 41% unfavorable, 50% view of Congress, 15%. By the way, those numbers, the Democrats are much higher than the Republicans are, but they're both with just 1 point off in the CBS New York Times poll of their all-time lows. And then you look, and I've got to talk about our Republican Party. You look at the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll this week, Barack Obama at his all-time low at 40%, the Republican Party at 19%. Now, the establishment's blaming the Tea Party. The Tea Party's blaming the establishment. We're in a mess. 19%.
I think politically, analytically, here's where we are. Barack Obama is unpopular. I think that means Republicans do well in November 2014.
Despite themselves?
Despite themselves.
The 19%.
But if they take the message from that all is well with the Republican Party, they're crazy. The Republican brand is very much damaged.
Why is
and
it
they need
so
to nominate,
unpopular?
and someone needs to run it. That's why you need to be a reform Republican. You need to be a populist. You need to be an agent of change. All that stuff.
Why is the Republican Party? Who do you blame for that 19% number from the New York Times, from the Wall Street Journal, NBC Wall Street Journal?
Look, you have a two-term president that fairly or unfairly leaves office with, what, 35%, or was it even that?
No, I think...
Approval rating, 29% or something like that?
Yeah.
Who's a Republican president. The greatest financial crisis of our time happens on his watch. You then have a lot of internal Republican fighting on the Hill, which people see, and whichever side you're on, you get disgruntled. If you're a sort of established or moderate, you say these lunatics are taking over the Republican Party. If you're a populist grassroots guy, you say, hey, we won a majority in 2010. How come they're thwarting our hopes? Then you have Mitt Romney in 2012, with all due respect to him, not exactly a fresh new Republican face, embodying grassroots sentiments or reform or change. You add it all up, I think you got, it's done a lot of damage.
And Gene
I think it can be fixed pretty quickly, because a presidential candidate can change the image of a party, as Bill Clinton showed. If we had been sitting here in 1990, we would have said, oh my God, Mondale, Dukakis, who were the Democratic leaders then?
Well, I'll tell you, even 1991, we were talking about the seven wards. Gene, though, I think the bigger problem for the Republican Party, you remember Paul Gigot writing this way back in 1996, 1997, saying if Mr. Gingrich doesn't want crazy people like me going after him all the time, keep them busy with an agenda. Keep them busy with new ideas. Keep them busy, fighting for something bigger than themselves. What does the House GOP stand for?
Well,
what message do they take out there? I mean, they're as vapid as Harry Reid in the Senate.
Yeah, there seems to be no there, Joe. There's nothing that they particularly want to do except pass useless bills that go nowhere, repealing Obamacare. Just a couple of points that to Bill's analysis of why the Republicans are kind of in the tank. Number one of the reasons that you didn't mention, Bill, that Bush was so was the war in Iraq, and that had a substantial impact on his unpopularity, and we should just note that as we perhaps go back into Iraq. And the second thing is that this question of whether the Republican Party, it's got to stand for something, but it's also got to get broader. It's got to because the country is getting broader, and it's got to speak to different kinds of people that it doesn't speak to now. And if it doesn't, then I think the Republican Party continues to sink, long term. It really does. It's got to speak to Latinos and African Americans and people who are not Southern whites, which is that's what it's becoming.
Okay, Bill, follow me. 15 seconds. Go.
The quality of Republican candidates is very high this time, though, and it will. If you elect Ben Sasse in Nebraska, Tom Cotton in Arkansas, Joni Ernst in Iowa, Langford in Oklahoma, Sullivan in Alaska, they're younger. They're not career politicians. I think it really changes the look. It adds to Rubio, Lee, Cruz, Kelly, Ayotte. You could look at the Republican Party in mid-2015 and think it's much better.
So you don't follow directions.
That was 14 seconds. I was watching the clock up there. I was watching the clock up there.
Maybe in Weekly Standard Time. All right.